Hi everyone, my name's Brenna Posey. I'm an employee here at NOCD. I also have lived experience with OCD myself, and I've gone through ERP therapy or exposure response prevention therapy and found a lot of success with it. And now I love to talk about it and love to talk about my story. So hopefully I can resonate with you that if you're watching this video, you could be struggling with OCD. I've been there. I know how debilitating it is. So now my mission is to bring hope to others that are struggling in the way that I did as well. I help manage our NoCD social accounts, our Instagram and TikTok pages. So feel free to check us out. It's at Treat My OCD. I run Instagram Q&As on our Instagram stories every Wednesday. So feel free to check out our page on Wednesdays and ask me a question, and I'll try to answer based off of my lived experience. This video I'm really excited about because we're talking about the moment that I realized I had OCD. Now, this is kind of a heavy topic, and I'm really excited to dive deeper into this because I think a lot of you could relate to my story because OCD is very misunderstood, and a lot of people don't realize that you're struggling with OCD when you're going through it. So I hope that when I talk about my story and how I found out I had OCD, that it gives you hope that, what you're going through has a name, and luckily there's effective treatment to help you manage symptoms and live the life that you want to live. Now, I think it's important to go back to the beginning before I knew I had OCD. I think it's important to go through the times that I was experiencing these debilitating symptoms and go through my OCD episodes, but at the time I didn't know it was OCD. So it's kind of a full circle moment now for me, which we'll get into by the end of this video. So what I'm going to do is just kind of walk through my OCD episodes. And I want you to know that whenever I was experiencing these episodes, I didn't know it was OCD. I thought something was horribly wrong with me. I couldn't figure it out. No one knew what it was, but it was OCD. Okay, so my first, looking back, the first time I'm able to recognize that I was going through OCD was whenever I was around 6 years old. And so I was in elementary school. I was always an anxious kid, definitely more anxious than like the normal anxiety of a kid. And I remember I had to say the phrase, "Good night, love you, see you tomorrow," in that speed, that order, every single night to both of my parents. And if I didn't do that, I thought they would die. And, as we know, OCD feels incredibly urgent and real. So as a kid, I thought I had to do that, or I had that responsibility. So I remember if I forgot to tell them that phrase before I went to bed, I would wake myself up if it was at 2 or 3 a.m., go downstairs, wake them up, and say that phrase. And now this OCD episode, I would say, lasted for a few months. And I think a lot of you can relate whenever I say this. It was like I had no symptoms of anxiety or OCD. And then one day a flip just switched and something went off in my brain telling me that I had to do this or else something bad would happen. And that, I call them like my OCD episodes. So I was in that episode for a few months and it was really hard for me. And to be honest, I don't know why it ended, but it did end, thank goodness. And so then I went back to my normal self after that phase, and that lasted for a few months. Now, the next OCD phase, of course, at the time, didn't know it was OCD. But now looking back, I'm able to, that was definitely OCD. I was a little bit older, so probably 10, and I really struggled with emetophobia, which now I realized that it was linked to OCD. So I was terrified to throw up. And it got to the point where I wouldn't eat because I was scared that if I ate something that was a little weird or off, that I would throw up. And it was really bad. So my mom was super worried because I lost weight and because I didn't want to eat because I didn't want to throw up. So I went to so many doctors. They did scans on my stomach to see what was going on. And of course, nothing came back wrong. And it was anxiety and emetophobia. Luckily, that OCD episode only lasted for, I would say, a little less than a year, and it just went away. And I have no idea why, but it did. And then the third OCD episode, I would say, happened whenever I was around 12 or 13. And in between these OCD episodes, it was like I was a normal, quote unquote, kid. I didn't struggle with any intrusive thoughts. I was well functioning. I had friends. I was involved. I did well in school. And then all of a sudden, one day, that flip went off in my brain, and I was struggling with OCD. So my third episode was harm OCD. And I was in middle school. I'll never forget, one day I woke up and had the thought, what if I'm going to harm myself? What if I snap and do something to myself? It was really rough for me because my brain wanted to know so bad if I was going to do something to myself. So every day, which looking back, these were compulsions, I would reassure myself that I loved my life, that I was happy. And I also wouldn't go around sharp objects because I was scared of that, and wouldn't go around balconies because I was scared of that. Looking back, those were compulsions. I didn't know what that was, but at the time I was performing a lot of compulsions, which, as we know now, compulsions and performing more of those keeps you stuck longer in the OCD cycle. So, and that this was probably the first OCD episode where it became pretty severe, and it lasted a little bit longer. So this lasted about a year, and by the time that I was like 6 months into this was every day, 24/7. I would wake up and be like, I wonder if this is going to go away today. I wonder if I'll be back to my normal self. And I went to my mom and I said, this is what's happening. And of course, as any mom would, she started to freak out. And it went to a therapist, did all the things, and no one could help me. Luckily, again, don't know why, but this episode just stopped randomly, and thank goodness. So, of course, again, I go back to my normal self. Don't know why, don't know how. It was like I was well functioning kid, loved life, didn't have those thoughts anymore. Now, fast forward, the harm one was in middle school, and I would say there was a 4 or 5 year break in between for whenever I had that theme and then my next theme in high school. And this one was sexual based. And I'm not going to get into the details of this because it's pretty sensitive to me and hard to talk about. But I know a lot of people that have OCD have struggled with sexual intrusive thoughts, and it can be devastating and very taboo and very hard to open up about, especially with your loved ones. And if you see a therapist, it can feel hard to talk to them about the more taboo thoughts. And I was a high schooler. I didn't know what was happening. So there was no way I wanted to open up to people about it because I was embarrassed. So this one, again, as I got older, it became more severe, my OCD. So this one, the sexual one in high school, I could barely function. And this lasted every single day. Again, it's one of those things where I didn't have OCD, and then one day the flip went off in my brain, and I was a different person starting on that day. I would ruminate, perform mental compulsions, which of course I didn't know this was OCD at the time. And by the time I was a few months in, it was so debilitating. I think people could see that I was struggling. So I opened up to my mom about it, didn't tell the rest of my family because I was so embarrassed. And then at that point, she sent me to the same therapist that I went to earlier in my life. And this is when I realized how you need specialized treatment for OCD, because I went to a talk therapist. She was awesome, incredible, don't get me wrong. But she would reassure me that I wasn't going to perform any of these scary, intrusive thoughts, that they didn't mean anything about me. She would reassure me. And at the time, I got that relief after all of my sessions were done. And then, of course, about an hour later, it came back, and I realized that that didn't help me and it made me worse over time. So that was my high school episode that lasted about a year and a half. That was tremendously severe. Could barely get out of bed at one point while I was in high school. My school was harder to complete. Friendships were not as great as I wanted it to be. Doing extracurricular activities was really hard because all I wanted to do was lay in bed because of how scary my thoughts were. And if this is you right now, I get it, and know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and you can get there. Now, the most recent theme I've had, so fast forward, that was in high school. The next theme I had was about 4 or 5 years after that. And that was about my mental health, actually. So I was very scared about developing another mental health disorder or condition. And it was really tricky because it was all in my brain. And I would check to see if I felt a certain way, if I was becoming depressed. And it absolutely was one of the hardest things I've gone through in my life, this specific episode. And it was, again, one of those things where I was completely normal, didn't have experienced any of these symptoms. Then one day that switch went off in my brain and it was like I was a different person. And this was at a time, actually early 2020, but right before COVID. It was winter. I was in college and I was really struggling. I went back to college, and honestly, looking back, I could have stayed at home and not have gone back to school. It was that bad. I couldn't function. Waking up was hard. Getting out of bed was hard. Doing anything was hard because I was in my brain 24/7 trying to figure it out, which I didn't know at the time was compulsions. Now we're going to get into the positive side of this. And 2020, I was really struggling. I remember I was in my bed in college scrolling on Instagram, and I found a post on my Explore page in my Explore feed on Instagram talking about OCD symptoms. And it was like, have you had these intrusive thoughts? And then were you trying to get rid of these intrusive thoughts? You may have OCD. And that caught my attention. I clicked on it. And as I was scrolling through the carousel post, it was a moment I have never experienced before. It was just, bam, I have hope now. I know exactly what the name is of what I was struggling with my entire life. And no one could tell me it was OCD. Not a therapist, not family, no one. And at that moment, I realized I can be okay. I have support. I know what it is. And now we can start to go on the journey to manage symptoms. Now, it turns out that that post was actually a post by NOCD. So it's kind of the full circle moment. So once I found that, I reached out to NOCD and became an intern for the company. And now, of course, I'm working as a full-time employee for NOCD and producing content that hopefully, that moment that I experienced of hope, hopefully what I'm doing now can provide you that exact same feeling I had and gives you hope. I hope this video shows that, one, OCD is still misunderstood and people don't understand it. But two, there is so much hope out there. And three, you're not alone. Because if you're going through any of these symptoms right now, I know how debilitating it can be. I know how it can limit the way that you want to live your life. I know what it's like to wake up every single day and have those scary, intrusive thoughts that you don't want to have. But know that with the right care, the right support, you can manage symptoms. I'm not going to sit here and say that my OCD is completely gone, but I've gone through ERP therapy, exposure response prevention therapy, through NOCD actually, and I learned so much, such as, sitting with the discomfort of these intrusive thoughts and not performing any mental compulsions has helped me sit in the uncertainty, and my brain was able to build tolerance to the uncertainty. So now I have a completely different relationship with anxiety and know that anxiety doesn't feel great in the moment, but you're so much stronger than it and you can get through it without having to figure it out, without having to push the anxiety away. You are strong enough to sit in the anxiety and let it pass. So if you're ready to begin your first step of OCD recovery journey, of your OCD, mental health journey, feel free to give NOCD a call. Our team would love to speak with you and chat through different options. And we have licensed therapists that are all certified and are experts in ERP therapy, the gold standard treatment for OCD. So if you're at that point where you realize that you may have OCD but don't know what to do about it, I get it. Go to our website, nocd.com, download our app, and our team would love to chat with you and see what your best options are. And thank you so much for listening to this video. I always love doing this. And let me know in the comments what you want to hear next, and maybe we can make another video.